It'll be a quick lunch, so everybody who's going to be going to Southern Command, please be ready to go to Southern Command on time. Be downstairs at 20. I will remind you of this, but it never hurts to say it at least twice. And if we're going to Southern Command, please make sure you have at least one piece of ID that you sent for the clearance process. If you did not sign up, there are no late sign-ups, so enjoy Coral Gables. And is everything, Kamal, is everything ready to go on the? Awesome. Okay, we're going to get started. For CCAA, it's always a pleasure to be here, and more than anything else, it's always a pleasure to welcome new people to the program. And in this particular instance, it's an absolute pleasure for us to welcome Ricardo Pedrosa, who is the General Manager of Copa Airlines USA. And Copa has generously supported the conference and will be supporting CCAA in terms of helping us get to Central America next year to continue our work. As I keep saying, we're a Caribbean basin, Caribbean Central American organization. So we absolutely are thrilled when we have partners that really help us become have more reach on both sides of the region. And Copa recently announced an expansion of its service, so we're delighted. I know Ricardo will talk to us some about that. And so without any more introduction, it's my pleasure to welcome Ricardo Pedrosa to the podium.
Good morning.
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 Well, I am very glad to be here, really. I am very happy as well because one of the things that I like is to speak good things about my company. And this is the reason because I am here. I want to try to find out, to explain to you why Copa Airlines has been, is, and will be a successful airline. We're going to see only an overview. Please.
Come on. There.
Okay, we can see here that Copa Airlines has been flying the American skies for almost 70 years. We began flights, you can see, in 1947, and the next year we're going to have 70 years. And I want to stand out something about this slide. The last year, 2015, Copa Airlines ordered 61 more airlines for the next years. These planes basically are the state-of-the-art. State-of-the-art Boeing 737 MAX, and this sort of represent the commitment of Copa Airlines to continue growing for the next year. Basically, this is the importance of this. Okay, this is one overview about what is Copa Airlines right now. We can see we have 354 flights. We operate a fleet of 100 planes, basically Boeing 737, all of them next generation, and Embraer 190. You know, Copa Airlines is the line of Panama. Our hub of operation is Panama. But we have an important presence in all continents, obviously, but specifically in Colombia, when we have 9 international destinations from and to Panama, and we have 7 domestic markets as well. This is our roadmaps. We have 7 right now, 74 destinations in 31 countries. Basically, we fly to all Latin America, and why not to think that in the future we want to have the rest of the principal cities as well, including obviously the Caribbean. This is the vision. To be the leading, here is the other screen, I'm sorry. To be the leading airline in the Latin America aviation And the preferred connection through Panama by connecting major cities from North, Central, and South America and the Caribbean. It makes sense. I have been in Copa for many years, and this has been the same vision along the years. Okay, let me try to explain why Copa, how is the business model of Copa Airlines. Basically, we have four fundamental strengths. The best geographical location, markets that need a hub, right infrastructure, and the world-class product. And we are going to explain with more detail each one. The first one, the best geographical region. It is very simple when we think where is located Panama. Panama is located in the center of the Americas. Simple. When we think in Panama, maybe we can think in the Panama Canal. Yes. The Panama Canal is connectivity at the end, but Copa Airlines represents the air connectivity. Okay? And additional, it's important to mention that Panama as a country has been, the economy of Panama has been performing very well along the last years. That's it. That is very important as well. Okay? The second one is market in need of a hub. And are you ready for this? This is very important in the Copa business model. More than 70% of the O&D's origin destination markets served by Copa Airlines are less than 20 passengers per day each way. In other words, small markets. We can say that obviously the Copa network are focused on underserved thin markets. The consequences of this basically is that we have a unique passenger mix through Panama. That's important thing in the Copa business model. The next one is the right infrastructure. Okay? Tocumen International Airport is the name of the Panama airport. Basically, try to maximize efficiency of aircraft operation and passenger connection. I want to stand out three things about Tocumen International Airport. This airport has 2 runways at the sea level. That represent the possibility that the airplanes can perform to the maximum capacity. Another important thing is that Panama, we can find in Panama optimal weather conditions along the year. Always in Panama there is good weather in general. We can see that. What's something very important for the next year. To the second part of the next year, Tocumen International Airport will add 20 additional jet bridge. That is very important because, as I told you, Copa continue growing and we need to move on in infrastructure as well. Okay, and finally the fourth strength is a world-class product. It makes sense. We can have everything, but if we don't offer a good service, it is impossible to continue growing with success. We have a world-class service. We have been recognized for different organizations, but this is just one example. 2015 World Travel Award for Mexico and Central America as leading airline. The average of our fleet is 6 years, one of the youngest of the region. Something important as well is that Copa is member of the Star Alliance, the biggest world airline alliance of airlines, obviously. The last year we launched Connect Miles, the frequent flyer, our own frequent flyer program. and this has been performing very well. And well, we continue growing. We added the 5th Copa Club in Medellin, Colombia. We have one in Panama, we have one in República Dominicana, Santo Domingo, we have one in San Jose, Costa Rica, we have another in Guatemala, basically, and Bogota. And I think the most important of the world-class product characteristic basically is leading on time performance. This is, I think, the most important about our service. We have been recognized by FlyStats 2015 and 2014 as the most on-time airline in Latin America. And we have been recognized for OAG 2015 as the most on-time airline in Latin America and the second one in the world. That means that, wow, you want to really arrive, to attend an important meeting in any country, I think Copa Airlines is a perfect option for you. Okay, this is the list. Basically, we are the second punctual airline around the world. The number one is Air Baltic. I don't know where Baltic flies, but well, Copa Airlines is the second one, really. And we are very proud of this. Okay, as a summary, this is a summary of everything. We have the right geography, the right airport infrastructure, the most complete intra-Latin America network, growing and underserved markets, right fleet and fleet plan, world-class product, a strong financial and operational performance, and obviously a very well-positioned brand. Well, along 2016, we have launched 3 new destinations, in this case Chiclayo in Peru, Rosario in Argentina, and Holguín in Cuba. Additional, we increase different frequencies in different markets. Well, basically, this is the overview I wanted to share with you. I think I just want to finish giving you an invitation. I would like to see you soon on board of one of our planes. Thank you very much, really, and continue enjoying your day.
Thank you so much, Ricardo. And it's always wonderful to see regional companies that are not just regional companies, but are becoming global companies and are, I don't know where our Baltic goes either, but great accomplishment to be up there. So, so congratulations to Copa and all your company and all your colleagues, and we look forward to partnering with you as we go forward. So thank you very much. It's now my pleasure to introduce Ambassador Kenneth Merton. He's the Haiti Special Coordinator and Deputy Assistant Secretary for Haiti at the U.S. Department of State. Right before coming on, I was trying to figure out how long we've known each other. We think it's almost 20 years. I remember sitting with him and having lunch in Haiti every few months and talking about the economic and business climate there. For those of you who follow what's going on in Haiti, we've just come out of a long delayed election, and we can now look forward to a rebuilding and working together and supporting all the work that has been done by Ambassador Merton to help grow the business and the investment climate in Haiti, and we look forward to partnering. And so it's my pleasure to introduce Ambassador Kenneth Merton to the podium. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Sally. I appreciate it very much. It's great to be back here with you again. It's been a while since I've been here. I used to attend these conferences regularly when I was economic counselor at the embassy in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, back in the late 90s and early 2000s. My time in Haiti, and I guess it perhaps shows either a great passion for the place or bad judgment, or perhaps a little bit of both. But I've been involved with Haiti on and off for about 28 years now throughout my diplomatic career, and it's been a place that has unfortunately seen its share of bad luck, but I remain resolutely optimistic about it, and I think if we can work together with the Haitians, with our Haitian partners, to address some of their political challenges, but really to work with them to address some of the fundamental economic challenges they face, I think it's a place that can have a pretty bright future. But anyway, this past Sunday, Haiti held the first round of elections to select the president and members of its legislature. These elections were started in 2015 and are essential to prosperity, governance, and the future of Haiti. In order to address the key issues facing Haiti, such as the recovery from devastation of Hurricane Matthew, electoral and judicial reform, anti-corruption measures, and the urgent need to spur economic growth, Haiti must have stability and a legitimate government with a 5-year mandate. Sunday's election coincided with the closure of Global Entrepreneurship Week and served as a reminder for the need for Haiti to fully participate within regional and global initiatives. Achieving political stability is a must, and this can only be completed through a credible electoral process. The Haitian people must have a voice in deciding who leads them. And the United States has long supported democracy, democratic institutions, and respect for human rights in Haiti. While we did not agree that the 2015 presidential elections needed to be rerun, we were encouraged by the process improvements implemented by the Provisional Electoral Council, or CEP. Among the many consequences of Hurricane Matthew was the first round of elections scheduled for October 9th. CEP consulted broadly to set a new date that balanced the political imperative of holding elections as quickly as possible against what was technically possible. Despite the setback, the focus of the United States remains unwavering. The urgent need for elected representatives at all levels of government in Haiti, including at the most senior level, has not waned. Rather, the passage of time accentuates this critical necessity. Only through transparent and credible elections and the seating of an elected president can Haiti return to constitutional rule. I'm pleased to report that the elections we saw on Sunday were observed by a robust OAS mission, who claimed that the elections not only took place peacefully and apparently well, but that there was greater Haitian ownership of the electoral process. I think that's a good thing, and frankly, I think that's the key for Haiti making progress going down the line, for Haitians to increasingly take ownership of their own destiny. We also remain committed to helping the people of Haiti recover from the devastation of Hurricane Matthew. We continue to work with the government of Haiti and local non-governmental organizations to ensure emergency relief packages reach people in need. As the single largest donor of humanitarian assistance for Hurricane Matthew relief, the U.S. government has contributed nearly $53 million, including over $40 million from USAID and $13 million from our friends at the Department of Defense. And here a special shout out to our friends at Southcom, where some of you will be visiting later today. They did a really spectacular job in making sure people got the relief that they needed after the hurricane. The goals of the U.S. and Haiti include helping build a strong civil society, which can contribute to overall credibility of elections. Such an investment is money well spent. Consequently, U.S. government assistance will continue to support the development of the Haitian National Police to enhance security through the country, as well as national election observation and civic education. Consistent with our shared commitments in the Inter-American Democratic Charter, the U.S. government is also funding an international observer mission from the Organization of American States and local Haitian observers in an effort to strengthen transparency and bolster voter confidence in their elections. As before, we will engage across a variety of sectors, including priority areas such as health, food security, economic growth, and infrastructure to improve the daily lives for the Haitian people. once Haiti gets beyond this electoral cycle. We also should encourage our Haitian partners to take steps that chart a course that sees Haiti develop and create economic opportunities for its people. Haiti needs a vibrant private sector that can play its role in developing the country. We, the United States, will encourage Haiti's government to take steps to facilitate investment and the creation of jobs. Many countries around the world have shown how making it easier to create and register business empowers people and creates economic growth and generates government revenue. Revenue for people, revenue for businesses, and revenue for Haiti's government, which is so desperately needing of it. I hope moving forward that we can really develop our partnership with Haiti in creating this good, sustainable economic growth and opportunity. In my view, it's the only way to build a more resilient and prosperous Haiti, a Haiti that can truly chart its own destiny. But before we get to work together on that, we really need to see the democratic process run its course in a fair and transparent way. So we support the Electoral Council and welcome the steadfast progress in organizing transparent, credible, and fair elections as scheduled. The Haitian people are waiting. The legitimacy of the forthcoming electoral process depends on their vote. The legitimacy of Haiti's rightful place among democracies in the hemisphere depends on its return to constitutional authority. And just to conclude, to circle back to where I started, I do remain optimistic about Haiti. And I think if we look back, those of us who followed Haiti for a long time, even before the earthquake, Haiti was doing some of the right things, and there was some economic growth. There were new businesses opening. There was economic opportunity. Perhaps not as much as we would have liked, but it was happening. The earthquake was, of course, a major setback. But the earthquake also saw the inpouring of a lot of assistance. Some of it very helpful, some of it not as helpful as it should have been, quite frankly. But it also, we had a government in power that was open and understanding of the need for investment. I think we've seen the tourism arrivals in Haiti go up significantly. We've seen the increase in the number of hotels and the arrivals from outside of Haiti. Haiti's been one of the fastest growing tourist destinations up until, I will say, this past year when they've seen a setback because of electoral instability. I would also note that the number of people employed, particularly in the apparel assembly sector, is now well over 40,000. They are taking advantage of the Hope and Help Act, which is two pieces of bipartisan legislation, which allows apparel assembled in Haiti to be imported into the United States virtually tax-free. This has proved a huge boon for Haitian manufacturing. And an industrial park that's now functioning in the north of Haiti that employs about 10,000 people is set to grow again this year and employ more folks. These are the kind of things that I'm optimistic about and I think can be done in Haiti. We need to work with them, we need to encourage them, and occasionally we need to push them to do the things that are right for the Haitian people. But I'm convinced that it can happen, and I'm sure that in partnership with organizations like yours and private sector folks like you, we can all help Haiti get there. Thanks very much for your time today.
Thank you, Ambassador. And we're going to, many of you know I have a special place in my heart for Haiti, so we really hope that this is the start of another opportunity to move forward, but we hope so. So I'd like to invite, we now have our plenary discussion, which is the discussion on new American president, the agenda for 2017 to 2021. I'll invite them to come up, and if I could get microphones for the participants, we'll get them mic'd up and ready to go. One of the things, no, keep coming, keep coming. One of the things following the remarks by Representative Engel yesterday, we did get a note last night saying that some work has been done by some of our regional ambassadors, and there's perhaps progress on HR 4939 in the Senate. So I'm going to take this opportunity to encourage all of you to reach out to the Senate Foreign Relations Committee to voice your support for that moving forward. The two key members are Senator Cardin and Senator Corker. So if Frank Santero from FedEx is here because he's in Tennessee, which is across the country, I'll be coming off the hip. I'm going to introduce our panel. We have Ambassador Riyad Insanali. He's the Ambassador of Guyana to the United States. On his left, we have Al Cardenas. He's a senior partner for Squire Patton Boggs, U.S. Barry Featherman, who is foreign policy and democratic campaign analyst. And Antonio Quito Colorado, who is advisor to the Secretary of Economic Development of Puerto Rico. And a few lifetimes ago was me. Yes, Tito was the executive director of CCAA about, I want to say maybe 20 years ago now. But I've worked with Tito a lot, and it's a delight to have him with us, and indeed a delight to have Ambassador Insanali, Mr. Cardenas, and Mr. Feldman with us. I do want to say, this is going to be an interactive panel. The panelists are going to talk. They're going to talk about what happened with the election, some of their views on where things are going, some of their views on what the region should be thinking about as we start to look at the 2017 and a new administration in Washington. But we want to really encourage all of you, because everybody has questions about this one, and there may not be answers yet, but we certainly want to know what we should be thinking about as we move into the new administration. So with that, I will turn over to Ambassador Insanali and start the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sally. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. When Sally kindly asked me to consider doing this a few weeks ago, I thought it would be a breeze. Of course, the morning of the 9th of November, I realized that life as usual has a way of confronting our expectations, and my life and my job had got infinitely more complicated. But I wasn't alone in that respect, and I thought about the invitation to do this, and I thought, well, it's still going to be a piece of cake, because after all, I'm not the person in the hot seat. I'm not the person who will have to answer the tough questions that you will pose. And my colleagues here, who have a lot more experience than I have, will be the ones who can try to bring some clarity to a situation where uncertainty is paramount. I take comfort in the fact that the United States is a country where institutions are strong, the press is free, and the rule of law prevails. In that respect, my embassy and my government, along with our Caribbean and our Central American friends, will be pursuing a path of positive engagement with the new administration. They are mutual interests, as Congresswoman Plaskett told us yesterday. The Caribbean and Central America are still very important regions to the United States. And as Congressman Engel will remind us, there's HR 4939 as an appropriate vehicle for pursuing and continuing that process of constructive engagement. I believe that we have a situation that is challenging, but we certainly, along with our friends in the United States, will be able to go back to the drawing board and rethink our strategies, recalibrate our positions, and come back and look at reinforcing the mutually beneficial relationship that exists between the United States and the Caribbean. I, with those few remarks, would like to turn the discussion over to our colleagues, whom I have the honor to introduce. And all I would ask them is, as they try to bring clarity to this situation, is to remember the words of, or if I may paraphrase a former US Defense Secretary, there are a lot of unknown unknowns. So please try and give us some knowns. No knowns. I don't know where we're going to get, but it's over to you, gentlemen. I mean, start first with Al Cardenas, who is a senior partner at Squire Patton and Boggs, nationally recognized for his leadership in the law, business, and politics. As many of you would know, he has served as an advisor to U.S. presidents, as counsel of record in a number of precedent-setting and published court decisions, and as a commentator and writer on issues of national importance. He previously served 2 terms as chairman of the Republican Party of Florida and 3 consecutive terms as its vice chairman. President Reagan chose the Alpha's transition team, making him responsible for the transition of the U.S. Department of Commerce. President Reagan also appointed him to chair the President's Commission on Small and Minority Business Affairs in 1982, and later as Special Ambassador to St. Kitts and Nevis upon that nation's independence in 1983. And there's a lot more that distinguishes our candidates, but it's in the bio online, and I will turn the floor over to Al.
Thank you, Ambassador. Well, I'd like to start my my short presentation with a question to the audience, and that is not what your preferences were, but how many of you, if you would raise your hand, thought that Donald Trump was going to win on November 8th? Yeah, interesting. That's about right. That's I think that's how Donald Trump's advisors felt too, and so it was as much of a surprise to the Trump campaign, I think, as it was a disappointment to Secretary Clinton's campaign. Look, there were a number of outside forces, as we now look back, that had a major impact on the outcome. Number one, in America, we don't like prolonged terms of the same party in the presidency. In 6 of the last 7 elections, where one party's president had served for 8 years, the next candidate elected, or the next president elected, was from the opposite party. So it was a little strange to me that Secretary Clinton would opt to campaign so much with a fairly popular president, President Obama, just because of the historical precedent that folks didn't want a continuation, but would rather have someone that would make a difference. The second aspect to this campaign, and probably the most unsettling during the campaign season and perhaps after, is the same atmosphere that's prevailing in some sectors of our society in America as caused the Brexit vote and the current unrest in Europe and some of the tipsy-turvy election probabilities that were foreseen in the near future. And that's based on 2 things. That's based on unprecedented immigration and cultural assimilation, scares people who are long-term generational residents of a country to see so much change take place on or about them, and that cultural unrest results in fear, anger, and a demonstration for change in the political process. The second one is fear of globalization. The United States was probably responsible for half of the world's GDP right after World War II. Now it's a little under 20%. And frankly, globalization, for all the right reasons, has brought about a spread of wealth around the world that socialists would have never dreamed possible. And that's a force that, in my opinion, is not only here to stay, but will expand as the world shrinks based on technology and other factors. The United States and Europe in particular, we have one challenge, and that is our children are not having that many children. We have declining populations. Immigration is a need. It must come if we're going to have strong labor and strong productivity and therefore strong GDP. And so, but we will contend with that issue not only through the past November 8th elections, but through a few election cycles to come, in my opinion. I think that Donald Trump brought to the American people a new face. It's the first time, it'll be our 45th president, it's the first time in our nation's history where a non-public servant, or I would say someone without public service a record or record in the military, such as President Eisenhower, first time we've elected a layman president of our country. And it's without precedent, and I think it's in response to the public's angst, the public's fears, the public's anger that I've expressed. And Mrs. Clinton touted her public record at a time where people were looking not for that as a tribute, in other words, not as a virtue, but as a defect. And so I think she was a victim of her own experiences and her own track record in government, given the political cycle that we're living in. So we have a total unknown in terms of his political proclivities rise to the presidency. This was an unusual campaign in that issues were not a factor in the outcome, and therefore issues were less discussed, less scrutinized, and because of a lack of public record, many of you, the press, and even many Republicans have a little knowledge, little understanding of where President-elect Donald Trump will be, other than his pronouncements, which we're beginning to get to know fairly well. I also wanted you to get a better understanding of what the President-elect can do in his first 100 days and what he needs Congress for. Many people have a misunderstanding as to the powers of the executive branch of the President, so I thought I'd share those real quick before I turn it over to my colleague. But number one, the President gets to choose a Supreme Court nominee. And in our country, a good part of that campaign, the reason why he was able to bring together social conservatives into an alignment with his campaign base was the nomination of Supreme Court justices. And so he's committed to do that right off the bat. We have a vacancy in the Supreme Court. We may have one or two more during his term in office, but that he's going to do. It needs the confirmation of the Senate, but that's something he'll do, and it'll be an interesting first test of how the Republicans hold together in the approval of a nominee. The second thing he can do is to scratch TPP. Now, on a macro level, many of us who believe in free trade are a bit disappointed about that, to be candid with you, but if you're a member of a Central America or Caribbean nation, it's probably not a bad thing for you, to be candid with you. So that's going to happen. He's committed to do that, and I'll bet you a few days after he takes office, he will disavow TPP. The third thing a president can do is roll back government regulations to a great extent. Those would include environmental regulations and regulations of other types. He can rescind President Obama's executive orders. Those are especially applicable in the Caribbean to Cuba, and we can talk more about that in the Q&A period. He can freeze federal hiring. He can cancel payments to the UN or other international bodies regarding climate change. Those are the things the president can do on his own, things he's committed to do, and we'll see where that goes. He, in terms of having to act with congressional approval, or the repeal of Obamacare, that's been a long part of his campaign, a campaign of many Republicans to Congress. That'll require congressional action. It'll be particularly testy in the Senate. He'll require the Congress to act if he's going to build a wall on our Mexican border. I think he's been obviously taking some steps back from an overall comment to that nature, but Congress must act. A wall is very expensive, and this country has other priorities, so we'll see what happens. Cutting taxes. That's, tax reform has to emanate in the Congress, and the president can offer Congress proposals, but this emanates from the Congress. And to pass an infrastructure bill, the things he's committed to do, the $1 trillion, $500 billion he's committed to do in infrastructure projects. All of those are originated and passed by Congress, and those are things that I want to bring to your attention. The reason why I brought these issues in particular is that they combined form a great part of what he plans to do his first 100 days. In terms of the leadership, there are 4 people who right now are the most influential of the president-elect, in my opinion, are Mike Pence, his vice presidential selection, Steve Bannon, who's going to be his chief strategist at the White House, Senator Jeff Sessions, who will be the Attorney General, and Jared Kushner, the 35-year-old son-in-law, who's representative of all of the kids of the family. And I venture to say that's a fairly accurate list of the 4 people he listens to the most. Not that he doesn't listen to others, but I would say those four have the strongest force and effect on his thought process moving forward. The three most significant cabinet positions remain unfilled. Those are Defense, Treasury, and State. There are a lot of different candidates being interviewed for all of those jobs. He will make his selections very quickly, not this week, by next week, because the FBI needs to do a whole investigation. It takes weeks, background check into these candidates. That has to be forwarded to the applicable committees in the Senate and to the Senate. And he wants to have a governing body as soon as he's sworn in on January 20th. So all of these things need to take place rather quickly. And so that's my short report for now. Happy to interact with my colleagues and take any questions you might have. Thanks.
Thank you, Rob. Ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker is Barry Featherman, a Senior Director for International Government Affairs at Gilead Sciences, where he oversees regional and institutional political activity within access, emerging, and select commercial markets. Barry has assisted clients with conducting businesses with governments in Latin America, Europe, Asia, the Middle East, Canada, and the United States. Has wide experience in nonprofits and has collaborated with major regional multilateral organizations and governments throughout Latin America and the Caribbean. Barry, could you share with us your perspective from the Democratic side?
I'd be happy to, and I want to thank you, Ambassador Encinali, for moderating this panel. Ambassador Encinali and I have been friends for a long time, and I tell people, you're getting old when your friends start becoming ambassadors. When Sally and Gwen first approached me about being part of this panel, it was obviously before the election, and I thought this would be a much easier task. I wouldn't have to do much prep because I was working as part of the foreign policy team for Secretary Clinton. And then November 8th came around, and on November 9th in the morning I scraped myself up off the floor, and there was a new day in America. What I thought I would do now is kind of give an overview of my perspective on what might transpire, particularly its impact on the Caribbean and Central America during the Trump administration. I think we did get some indications of that both during the campaign and then I think early on as part of the transition. Obviously, there are key roles that have not been filled yet, as Al Cardenas had alluded to, and I think as the administration takes shape in terms of personnel that will occupy that both the cabinet and the sub-cabinet levels, we'll get a better feel for what the administration will look like going forward. But I did want to point out some of the issues that were discussed during the campaign and how they could prospectively impact business and relations both within Central America as well as within the Caribbean. And I'll start off with Mexico. I was, about a week and a half ago, I was at a lunch with President Zedillo, who reminded me that Mexico is part of the Caribbean and part of Central America. The economic situation in Mexico will obviously have an impact on the region. Obviously, the president-elect during the campaign talked about building a wall between the U.S. and Mexico. Many of you may already know that there is a wall between the U.S. and Mexico for any of us who have been along the U.S.-Mexico frontier. So what I gather from that is that the ideas are either to extend it or to make it higher. Obviously, it will be quite costly. I think the estimates to do that are approximately $25 billion. And the president-elect had said that he would have Mexico pay for it, which is unlikely to happen. But obviously, that kind of talk could have serious risk for Mexico's economy. The other aspect of that is whether or not the U.S. Congress would ultimately pay for it, or money would be deducted from remittances going back to Mexico. The implications could be quite serious for Mexico. Along those lines, the president-elect has also talked about renegotiating NAFTA, which also would have serious economic implications for Mexico. 80% of Mexico's exports are to the United States, and 60% of its imports come from the United States. We don't really know what will transpire with the renegotiation of NAFTA. Obviously, during the campaign, there was a lot of talk of the fact that Bill Clinton had signed the North American Free Trade Agreement. But it was actually George Herbert Walker Bush who negotiated the agreement. So it was actually negotiated during the Republican administration. But nevertheless, following the passage of NAFTA in the United States, we had the longest sustained period of economic growth in our history up until that point of time. I think, all of this talk, though, portends not just a rise of nationalism like we've seen in the United States in certain quarters, but certainly I think we'll see a corollary effect in Mexico and the rise of potential populists to the presidency in Mexico as well in the form of Andrés Manuel López Obrador. So there are implications. And I think it's certainly something to consider because a deterioration of the relationship between the U.S. and Mexico could have wider implications for the hemisphere. The other area that is obviously of interest and more pertinent to the region is Cuba policy. In that area, Trump has been unclear. He said during the campaign that he would have negotiated a better deal. But he hasn't said that he will roll back the agreements. So it's difficult to gauge what ultimately will transpire. Obviously, there could be some changes in recent executive orders, but whether or not the reestablishment of relations would somehow be canceled out, I think is still a question mark. In terms of our relationship with Venezuela, another country in the region, I think the relationship could certainly become more antagonistic than it's been in recent years. President Obama always opted to deal with the region through the regional multilaterals, most notably the Organization of American States. And I think we're going to see, at least if the campaign by Trump portends anything, more of a bilateral engagement. So the relationship with Venezuela, again, a bit of a question mark. I think in terms of the relationship between the United States and Central America and the Caribbean, the most impactful policies that the United States may have during the Trump administration is a change in immigration policy, and particularly deportations of illegal immigrants back to their homeland. What would the implications be for the region? Well, from my perspective, if we look at the amount of remittances that are going back to the region, both from legal immigration as well as illegal immigration, it's quite high. For example, in El Salvador, remittances account for 16% of GDP. In Honduras, they account for 18% of GDP. And in Guatemala, approximately 10% of GDP. That's an area that one has to look at closely in terms of how immigration policy transpires during the Trump administration. There was virtually no talk of the DR-CAFTA agreement during any of the debates, despite the fact that there was a great focus on NAFTA, I think primarily because Mexico has continued to build such a strong manufacturing base. We don't really see anything comparable in Central America and the Caribbean, so it could be that there will not be anything done with respect to DR-CAFTA. The withdrawal of TPP is from TPP, as the president-elect just announced, certainly could have negative implications for some South American economies, Colombia, Chile, and Peru, less likely in the Caribbean and Central America. And then finally, climate policy. A withdrawal from the climate accords that were negotiated in Paris also as something that could have negative implications. But ultimately, the way I see this is that it's not just, we are a nation of institutions, it's not just the president-elect's ideas. People in his own party, in the Republican Party, have certain disagreements especially when it comes to the area of free trade. And so we'll need to see how that plays out. And then obviously, there will be in some areas strong opposition by quarters within the Democratic Party, even though they're a minority in both the House and Senate. I think you'll hear some vocal voices. And so there are unknowns, but I think a lot of those unknowns will start to reveal themselves as a cabinet is put into place, and we actually see, who takes leadership positions. President Obama has said during the APEC summit and during his recent visits to Greece and Germany that we do need to give the president-elect a chance. And certainly I'm one, even though I'm a member of the opposition party, that wants to see how things unfold. Obviously, where we feel that he's doing the right thing, we'll support him, and we'll wage vigorous, loyal opposition when we disagree with what he does. But my message at the end is really that there is hope, because this is a country of strong institutions, and we'll see how things evolve.
Yeah. Thank you, Mario. Ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker really needs no introduction. Tito Colorado was, of course, the Executive Director of CCA, relevant to his Caribbean Latin American action from 1996 to 1999. 1992, he was Puerto Rico's resident commissioner to the United States Congress. And he's, of course, practiced corporate and tax law and being a tax law professor at the University of Puerto Rico and the Inter-American University Law Schools. I'll hand it over to Tito, perhaps to give us some perspective from the region. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Ambassador, and it is a real pleasure to be here with a group of old friends and a group of new friends. And the way I solved the problem of my friends becoming ambassadors, because my friends became ambassadors and now they are retired from being ambassadors. So the only way I can do it is meet new ambassadors or new people who can become ambassadors. So that's what I'm trying to do, and that's why I'm here. That's one of the reasons. No, I probably, in the group, somehow I represent the Caribbean. I remember once, it should be my bio, but I didn't put it. Michael Moundy, who was a very good friend, said of me that I was a real Caribbean, and that was more important for me than any degree that I may have. I saw the hands, of people who thought that Trump would win. We didn't ask the question, but I'm sure I wouldn't see many hands of people who knew that if he won, what was going to happen, or what was he going to do. So I think the way I see it, the main question is which Donald Trump we will have for the next 4 years. Will it be the one before the election, the one post-election, or the one post-swearing-in ceremony that we don't know? We really don't know any of the three. So I guess we're in a situation that we've never been before. Maybe good, maybe bad, maybe somehow in between. There's another issue that I think is important. I don't think, and I could be absolutely wrong, maybe he can change also, and I think he will have to, but I don't see he as being, or as trying to be reelected, to be the president for 8 years. And that worries me a lot. Because obviously, if you just want to do those 4 years and do many of the things he has said that he will do, we may have a problem. So I have no idea really what is going to happen. So what I believe is we should be prepared. It's going to depend on many things. It's going to depend on which groups he's gonna deal with, which groups he's gonna pay attention with, to, who are the people who are gonna be around him. Those, we know some of them, but it's different what has happened in his life up to now and what's gonna happen in the next 4 years. So there are many issues which are unknown to us. The appointments that he has made already sort of tell us, well, is the pre-election Trump. Some of them say is the post-election Trump, but we really haven't seen much yet. For example, we heard that he appointed someone in Cuba, which we know is in favor of the embargo. So we know that the mentality that is there. Now, how can that mentality be adjusted to what others believe? It's something else. I remember, we had our most important, I would say, or in Puerto Rico, our first elected governor, Muñoz Marín. And every time somebody asked me how or why was he so successful, I say, well, he knew that he didn't know. And therefore he got people who knew more than him. And may Trump be willing to do that. May he change his opinions on certain things after he realizes that they have to be adjusted or that they were completely wrong. I have a problem. My problem is that the people voted, and they may get what they voted for. I hope not. We have populism as one of the new things happening in the world, which is not a new thing. That's always happened, You say you're going to give what you cannot give, and then you just don't give it. But I'm more scared of nationalism because of the things that I have seen already. And I think it can, I hope not, destroy, but it can hurt a lot the heart of the American society or the American people. Obviously, we're going to have less government and more private sector. We're talking about a new investment, a $1 trillion investment, basically, and he has said so, it's going to be handled by the private sector. That may have some good results, it may not. I'm a Democrat, but there are many things that I agree with Republicans, there are many things that I agree with the Democrats also. In privatization, in investment, in putting the capital to work for the country, sometimes I am more Republican than Democrat. Now, we have to understand or remember one thing. He's not going to govern alone. He's going to have a group of people that he will appoint that the Senate has to confirm. And though he has, let me say not he, the Republicans have won the Senate and the House again. So he can say he has a majority, but I don't think he has a majority. Because many of the people, the Republicans that are there, do not agree with many of the things that he has said. Therefore, the president, after the swearing-in ceremony. So there's going to be a ball here or a dance, and people are going to be dancing probably to different tunes, Both the Democratic sector in the Senate is going to be important. Why? Because some of them, may join forces with some of the Republicans. How is that going to balance out? I don't know. But it's going to depend on the issues. When we're talking about the free trade agreements, he talked about NAFTA, but obviously for us in the Caribbean, CAFTA is very important for the Dominican Republic and for all of Central America. What's going to happen? If, for example, the Dominican Republic has put a lot of their efforts to sell to the United States, and they're selling a lot of products to the United States. They're buying also a lot of products from the United States. So we have, I hope that this be analyzed in such a way that, the reality of the issues, the truth will prevail. And that what happens in the States is good not only for the States, but it's also good for the neighbors. Obviously, I have a special consideration to take into account, which is Puerto Rico. And that's another problem we can discuss later. Now, for example, we were talking before about the no-labels group in Congress. This may have an important participation, which is a group, I think, both in the House and in the Senate, right? In both chambers that include people from the Republican Party and people from the Democratic Party trying to find solutions together to issues in where they can get a consensus. So I'm going to end up by saying this is going to affect us, all of us. Mexico, obviously, Central America, the Caribbean. There are many benefits of legislation, special legislation, aid that are given to the countries in the Caribbean that we don't know what's going to happen with them. So one way or the other is going to affect us, all of us. And there was some advertisement that I saw today on the TV. I don't know what it was for, but it says, "Are we ready? Ready, ready, ready." Yes, we're not ready. As I said, many of the people who thought he could win didn't know what was going to happen. And we're not ready for what we don't know. So I think we have to get ready. There are a number of alternatives, and therefore we have to get ready to deal with it. Now, how do we get ready? First of all, if we look at the Democratic Party, if we look at the representatives in Congress of many of our communities in the States, I think we don't have to do much effort to have them on our side. The Democratic Party and all of the members are on our side, basically. But then we have to deal with the people we don't know so much, which are the Republicans. Now, how do we deal with them? The votes of the minority, the diaspora, will Trump pay any attention to that? I don't think he will. He might pay some attention, maybe. But those that will pay attention are the representatives and the senators that depend on those votes, because they want to be reelected. So again, I believe that we have to organize our people in the States. We have to organize our leaders in the Caribbean to make sure that our voices are heard. We have to do that. I think CCAA will be an important part of that if we can work together. So I think we have a lot of work to do for whatever. We have to be organized and then work on those issues that are important and try to convince the members of Congress, try to convince the leaders of the region, but also the leaders of the world, of the importance, and leaders in the United States, of the importance of things that are important to us and that really are also good for the United States. So basically, my my advice is that, knowing that we are not ready, that we get ready.
Thanks, Isidro. To be fair to our panelists, I think there are really too many questions out there, and it's not for them to be able to provide all the answers to those questions. Obviously, from what we've heard, a lot will depend on some key appointments that are still to be made. We can expect rolling back in areas of policy such as Cuba, free trade, climate change, and ramping up in other areas such as immigration, Venezuela, and I might add security. Still scope for common ground between the United States and the region, but I think one of the key areas, of course, is the fact that even though the Republicans have taken the presidency, the Senate, and the House, they're not all necessarily on the same page. And the question of engagement through our diaspora and through our political leaders with members of the Congress is, I think, a very good point that has been made. But let me not, ladies and gentlemen, speak too much. The floor is open, and we really welcome some conversation, some discussions, some questions, and an extension of the conversation.
Rick Morrell from Tropical Shipping. I can't think of, other than energy issue recently, I can't think of any attention that any administration has really paid to the Caribbean islands over the last, I don't know, 20 years or so. I think Reagan was the last one that really spent any real time looking at the well-being of the Caribbean. So my question for the group is, what is it we can do through CCA or through other mechanisms to bring attention to the need for the Caribbean to at least be on an agenda? Because we've been out in the desert for a long time.
Well, the good news, I think, is that this is the Trump campaign, because he was so new to the process, had not gone through the policy formulations and the deep conversations about the Caribbean, Central America, perhaps your group did. And so, when I see a blank canvas, I see opportunity. I mean, I'm an optimist. I think, contrary to what some of the thought process is, I want to give this president the benefit of the doubt. Everybody thought Richard Nixon was going to be a thorn on the side of global relationships, and he was the guy who opened the doors to China, and in many ways to trading opportunities that no one thought possible. And frankly, I thought he was a visionary at that end. I think that the $6 trillion that our country has spent fighting terrorism around the world, a lot of it Donald Trump feels was unnecessary. He wants to spend some of that money back in things such as infrastructure, but also in other projects. And so the Caribbean and Central America, as far as I can tell, other than the good points that Barry has raised, it's a blank canvas. I think we can enormously help by providing policy ideas, suggestions, talking about the benefit of additional innovations that we haven't thought of, and that the administration, everybody wants a legacy. And I think Donald Trump, you can say whatever you will about his self-centered personality. One of the good news about self-centered personalities is you want a legacy and you want to do well, and you want to be recognized for it, and you also have a blank canvas. And so I think CCCA and other organizations ought to feed that blank canvas, help shape it, help color it, and to the extent that we can provide policy ideas to be explored, primarily in the economic front, I think that's what we ought to do. I'm encouraged by the fact that I haven't seen any policies which will roll back USAID yet. I haven't seen any policies that roll back the Millennium Fund, for example. I haven't seen any policies that deal with that. Obviously, I think there has to be a conversation. If we're going to have deportations, especially of those who committed crimes. Central America has, and some countries in the Caribbean have a hard time as it is dealing with runaway crime. How do we talk this administration into doing that in a way that's in a way that allows these countries to, in essence, absorb greater challenges than they already have? And so if you're talking about the Northern Triangle in Central America, and you're going to send back thousands and thousands of deported folks who are primarily have some criminal background, and you got to have a conversation as to how you do that. How do you help these countries combat crime? It's got to be a full package, not a one-way package. And so I think what we need to do is to stress for solutions to challenges that will be presented by some of these policies. And again, you've got three sources of policy direction here. You've got the Republican majority, you got a Democrat minority in Congress, and you got the White House. And all three are going to have a seat at the table. Democrats a little less. They're going to have maybe a little less leverage, and my colleagues think, in the Senate, because 10 Democrat senators are running for re-election in states where Donald Trump won, and so they're, I think, going to have to be measured. And I think, and also the good news is Chuck Schumer, I think, is a far improvement about compromise and working together. Harry Reid was, I don't know if you're a friend of Harry, but that's just my personal feeling on it. And so I think the likelihood that things like immigration reform, we could work from the congressional side in a way that that's palatable. And frankly, I think not having immigration policy for the last 20 years is worse than what this Congress can accomplish. And so uncertainty is bad for business, it's bad for the economy, it's bad for our sovereignties. And so I think bringing certainty to a lot of these things will be helpful. And look, in terms of trade, I've talked to a number of people in the transition who are saying, look, Donald Trump is not against trade. He may have taken special points of view to highlight a point during a campaign. He's not, he doesn't favor TPP because there are just too many countries involved, some of whom he likes and some of whom he doesn't, and painting it with a broad brush in his eyes is not a great thing to do. But I have heard that he's willing to embark on bilateral agreements with many of the nations that were involved with TPP, like Korea and others. And so my sense is, let's take the proclivities and let's make the best of these rather than be perennial complainers. So those are some of the suggestions. But bilateral trade agreements are a lot more likely to take place during his 4 years in office than any major program that requires, more significant participation.
Before I ask Mario Tito to respond, I'd just like to add that it's not just energy that the Obama administration has been engaging the Caribbean on. There is a Caribbean Security Initiative, and that has been a major platform for cooperation. And we already have deportations of criminals to our jurisdictions, and it's a problem for our small jurisdictions, but it's a problem that we've been cooperating with the U.S. On dealing with. And I'm not so sure about this fear of mass deportations, because after all, the United States is still a country where, as I said earlier, the rule of law prevails and there's due process. You're not going to be rounding up people and putting them on planes and boats and sending them home. They have to be put through the judicial system here. And things will play out as they have to play out within a framework of the law. That's maybe quite optimistic, but I think we have to respect the institutions and the processes here. But Tito,
basically, I agree with all in the sense of we have to give him the opportunity. As a matter of fact, we should work with him. He's the president. He's going to be the president very soon. He's the president-elect now. And there's no reason why we shouldn't try to do our best working with his people. He's going to have a lot of people or a number of people in the cabinet who are going to understand what we're saying. I'm sure. Now, we'll find who they are, and then we'll have to try to communicate through them. But basically, talking Trump's language, we're talking about marketing a product. Basically what we have to do. When we look about the Caribbean, we have to, this is our product. What do we sell? What do we buy? What do we produce? And I'm not talking about products in that sense. We're talking about what do we mean to the United States? And how do you do that? But basically, you have to look at every number that has anything to do with our relationship. How much we buy, how much we sell, what do we do, how many people we have in the different districts. So we have to become pertinent. We're not pertinent at this time. As a matter of fact, this is my fight in Puerto Rico all the time. During the presidency of Reagan and Bush, we were doing things in the Caribbean, everywhere. And every island of the Caribbean and Puerto Rico, were known. And I used to go to Congress, and everybody was happy with what we were doing. We were pertinent. We were partners. We were giving the United States something, and we were getting something. I used to tell to my friends in the Caribbean, to Maria Eugenia Charles, to Michael Manley, to many of them, telling them, okay, it has to be good for all three of us. If it is not good for all three of us, it's not good. And so many things worked well. I was in the Dominican Republic a few weeks ago, and many of the jobs that we created then are still there. So there are many things we can do, but people have to know, and the administration has to realize that we exist. And therefore, we have to work together in making ourselves pertinent.
Well, I think there are a number of opportunities for a more robust engagement between the United States and the Caribbean. One of the things that Congressman Engel mentioned yesterday is his legislation, which has passed the House and is now before the Senate, to establish U.S. diplomatic missions in countries in the Caribbean that don't currently have those. And I think that's an important step in the consolidation of the relationship between the United States and the Caribbean. But there are other things that I think the private sector can do aside from just the government. And part of that, it requires, I think, leveraging members of Congress who are obviously sympathetic towards the region and have the power of the bully pulpit, aside from any legislation that they could pass. There is a Congressional Caribbean Caucus, and the Congressional Black Caucus are both entities within the Congress that are very active in the region, and from time to time do organize events that are specifically focused on the region. I think also the business community in the United States that's active in the region should be doing more fly-in days into Washington to both meet with members of Congress, but also with administration officials to continue to fly the flag. Obviously, the Caribbean Diplomatic Corps does that on a regular basis, but I think that in and of itself is not necessarily sufficient, and especially as the business community to really be ambassadors for your own countries yourself, and also to talk about what your economic engagement is in the region. So I think those are two aspects, and obviously forums like this, as well as staying engaged in business associations that could have a more collective influence is important. The other thing that I would mention finally is the region has moved towards economic diversification. So I think there's also needs to be a push in terms of explaining to both U.S. political leaders, but maybe to the U.S. population in general, that there's more to the Caribbean than just palm trees and beaches. One of the initiatives that Owen Arthur started during his tenure as Prime Minister of Barbados was to establish an office with a chief technology advisor. Philip Goddard was the first person to occupy that post. And it was really an effort towards economic diversification and bringing more high-tech companies to Barbados. And a lot has been done along those lines, and you have a lot of entrepreneurs in the region. And I think those types of things need to be highlighted, both from the perspective of making policymakers aware of what's happening in the region, but I think making the broader business community in the United States aware of what's going on in the region.
Can we get 2 or 3 questions? Yeah, the gentleman at the back first, please.
Thank you. How do you feel that the new administration is going to deal with the Puerto Rican debt crisis? Governor Bedillo has already said that he's not in favor of the Federal Control Board. So do you think there'll be a change with this administration?
Sorry, let's ask a couple questions and then take them.
Oh, okay,
We're out
okay,
of
okay.
time. And there was a gentleman in the front.
Hi, Bruce Segaris. It seems to me this is very similar to the mid-1980s when Ronald Reagan came in. I remember when I did the Caribbean Justice Improvement Project for the USAID, it was all about security. And if you look at the Caribbean Security Engagement Act, it's all about security. In addition, like Ronald Reagan, Mr. Trump is a businessman. So I think a couple things that we can do. We can do bilateral investment treaties, which is something that Trump likes to do. He likes to do direct investment. Another thing we can do is we can do things not just with the federal government, but with the state governments. So for instance, we should be doing all kinds of bilateral tourism agreements with the southeastern states. So it's similar to what California does with Mexico and what it does with Israel. We can do things like in plantocracy tourism, sports tourism. So, I mean, I think there are opportunities to be had.
One more question and then we'll go back to the panel.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. My name is Rafael Paz from the Dominican Republic. I want to ask you, is there any common agenda or common strategy of the Central American Caribbean countries in order to improve the relationship with the United States, in order to have more influence? Is there any mechanism that we are working on? And do we have any public-private agenda in that order? Thank you.
Perhaps take deal with the Puerto Rico question first.
Yes, basically what I can say is this is something new. The group is meeting this last week or met last week for the second or third time. The board, which is composed of people who were appointed by recommended by the parties. Obviously, we have one more Republican than Democrats. Part of that group. 4 of them are from Puerto Rico. And I don't know if that is good or bad, but they have an interest. They have a conflict of interest, which is good for us, in the sense that they have a conflict because they have their investment, their money is in Puerto Rico, so they want to help Puerto Rico. So contrary to what people say, I believe the board as such, the junta, really wants to help. How are they going to do it? That is a problem. In the sense that if you continue, the main force in Puerto Rico, wrongly, obviously it shouldn't be that way, but it's the government. The government is the biggest business in Puerto Rico, and that is wrong. And then they say the private sector is small, is inefficient. No, it's that the government doesn't let the private sector grow. So I think this planning, I don't think it's going to change much because it was made by the Republicans, basically, with the help of the Secretary of the Treasury. As I said before, I don't believe in the way it was done, but I think it's going to help Puerto Rico. I think it's going to help Puerto Rico.
Yeah, well, we had just convened in Panama a number of months ago, as you know, Council of the Americas were the heads of state, and ministers convene in the private sector for 4 or 5 days of getting together. That's every 4 years. A lot of great NGOs, C6CA being one of them, convene and provide input, Inter-American Dialogue in Washington and others. But when it comes to government, you know, heads of state who can actually take action or and perhaps promote bilateral action with the United States. I always thought 4 years was too long. You know, it's something that needs to be done every couple of years in order for it to be sequential, in order for it to be cyclical, in order for it to be more influential. Look, we have tried, I remember since Bill Clinton days, we tried to have the free trade zone so the Americas a bigger picture. How do we trade as one hemisphere? That's not going to happen in the short end for a whole host of reasons. And so we need to work on what's doable on a more compact basis. I think these councils that meet every 4 years need to do it every 2, but that's I think the right corpus. You know, the OAS is great, but they deal primarily with, as you know, some hemispheric policy issues that have a lot of sovereign issues to deal with, human rights, things of that nature. For pure economic stimulation, I think you need to have these sessions every 2 years and have them attended by heads of government, commerce ministers, you know, private sector leaders in getting things done. And, you know, I've been pounding on that. Hopefully, President-elect Trump likes the idea and promotes it himself. But I think something that, and look, that Central America and Caribbean have at least half the votes, if not the majority of the votes. We ought to vote for doing this every 2 years.
Barry, any thoughts on closer engagement on the bilateral level, particularly with states?
Yeah, you know, I think from a multilateral point of view, obviously CARICOM will have its intersessional heads of government in Georgetown in February, and that will be the first meeting of all of the heads of government of the region, and I have no doubt that, you know, engagement with the United States will be discussed. Obviously, the Dominican Republic is not part of that, but I think to some extent the discussion between the DR and the US will take place on a bilateral basis and perhaps on a multilateral basis within the context of the Summit of the Americas process. But I agree with Al that that's something that should probably occur more frequently, and because the relationship between the US and the region is just too important to allow it to languish you know, for such a long period of time without the heads of government getting together. Having said that, there are obviously other opportunities. President Obama is in Peru engaging with leaders from some of the countries in the hemisphere at the APEC summit in Lima.
Let me say that with regard to the last question, that there is no Central American, Caribbean agenda or strategy that I know of, unfortunately. I think it's a very valid question. The Caribbean, Central American relationship has waxed and waned over the years. There have been problems like the Banana Wars, fallout of the candidacy of Bert Niehaus as the OAS Secretary Generalship. And the relationship has been marked by periods of distrust and suspicion, ignorance, actually. But I personally believe we need a strong Caribbean Central American relationship. We need a Caribbean relationship, intra-Caribbean relationship that goes beyond CARICOM. We need to be closer to the DR, Haiti, Cuba. Well, Haiti is part of CARICOM, but even that is problematic because some of us within the English-speaking Caribbean forget that. And that is unfortunate. So we need to be doing more as governments in the region to reach out to other governments in the wider region. And organizations like CCA have a role to play in that respect. I think this is a valuable forum for us to meet and discuss. But perhaps we could think about some more activities where the two sub-regions are being brought together to develop common strategies. Certainly, Ambassador Philip Spencer of Trinidad and Tobago is here. We've already talked about reaching out to our Central American colleagues in Washington, and that is something we will be pursuing. So, it's a good point, and we've got a lot of work to do.
Yeah, let me add, when I was working with the whole Caribbean, we had the first ever meeting of ministers of foreign affairs. I was also with the then Secretary General of the OAS, and we had the first meeting of Caribbean, English-speaking Caribbean and Central America in San Pedro Sula. And then later on, I think they met again, but that hasn't continued, and I think that there should be. Dominican Republic, we helped Dominican Republic become part of CARIFORUM, so they have a relationship with CARICOM, but I think we have to do much more now. I think we have to do much more now. We should work as a unit, Central America, the Caribbean, and maybe the Association of American Caribbean States, or but I think we should look at how can we make sure that it's done.
Ambassador Spencer?
Morning, Ambassador Insanali. I really enjoyed the panel. I like the diversity of perspective. And I just want to latch on to one particular theme that keeps ringing through. It's time the Caribbean and Central America does a better job of telling our story. I think what has happened in the United States is that those regions in the world that have got the attention of successive administrations have been those regions that have been able to go and tell their story. Apart from that, we live in an environment now where countries and regions can't rely on government-to-government relations to really engage and achieve success. That G2G must now be supported by people-to-people and business-to-business interaction. All of those influences have to be weighed in. Government-to-government relations is really the tip of the iceberg. So when we don't deploy and leverage our business-to-business in forums such as CCA and other diaspora communities and voices to tell our story, we are disabling 90% of our capacity to achieve our objectives and to engage in type of advocacy. And so as Ambassador Insanali said, that's something that we will change now going forward, and I think that we have opportunities in spite of the uncertainty of the time that have arisen with the outcome of the recent election. Thanks very much.
We have time for about one or two more quick questions. Yes, sir.
Good morning. I really enjoyed your presentation. Thank you very much. My name is Pat Miniguchi. I'm a trustee of CCAA, former regional head of Scotiabank in the Caribbean and Central America. I'd like to comment on what Tito was saying earlier about the CCAA being relevant, and to the ambassador's point about telling our story. I think this is where the CCAA can really make a difference in telling our story as a region, and also about the pertinence. And the CCAA needs your help, and I'm asking for your help and your support. The board has undertaken a reflection to reconsider how to become more pertinent, how to become more of a force in the region, so that in Washington we can get the attention that we should have. But we need your help. We're going to do some work on our part, but we will be reaching out to all of you, and we're going to ask you for your financial support and contribution. So please think about becoming a member, becoming a corporate sponsor, and supporting the CCA financially, because in order to do the things that we need to do, in order to become more relevant, like everything else, you need sustainable revenue, you need sustainable financial resources, so that you can hire and have the staff and the resources to be able to drive the activities that will make us pertinent. Sally and her team have done a wonderful job. It's a very small and modest team, and that team needs help, it needs to be sustained, and it needs the support. And the support has to come from all of us. When I was the regional head of Scotiabank, even though as a Canadian, I found our presence in the Caribbean to be a key factor for why we were supporting the CCA back then, 10, 15 years ago, because we felt that it was important to advance the social agenda, but as well as the economic agenda, and it was good business. It made good business sense. It advanced the brand, it advanced the business, and it also was fulfilling our corporate social responsibility. So that's something I think all businesses, all individuals need to take into consideration. So my ask of all of you is, please keep that in mind. Sally and the board will be reaching out to all of you in the months that come. I'm not sure exactly when. We're just starting to move on this agenda item. But please consider that. Please consider supporting the CCA, talking about it to other private sector members so that we can be able to do the things to do and become pertinent and relevant. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we've got time just for a few closing remarks from each panelist. Maybe we start, Tito, in reverse order.
Well, basically, I believe that, and we've done it before, so it's nothing that we're thinking, well, we could do what we haven't done. We've done it before, we have to do it better. When the ambassador was talking about, I was thinking about so much mention now of the private public partnerships or public-private agreements, PPA or PPP, whatever, and that's what we need. We need the public-private agreement to give, whatever is necessary to make our image pertinent, to make our image known, to make the United States and the world, but the United States realize the importance of the Caribbean. The importance is there, but they don't realize it now as they did before. So I think what we should do is work together, whichever way, with whatever organizations. It doesn't have to be this one or the other. They all have to work together. It doesn't matter who takes the credit. That's not the issue. The issue is doing things, and the credit should be for the region.
So, I was watching Saturday Night Live, and I saw this session that they did on living in the bubble, and everybody living in the bubble. And living in Washington, sometimes I feel like I live in the bubble. But I will say this, that everybody competes for the attention of political leaders in Washington. It is really a competition of ideas. And the Caribbean is a relatively small region, and when you look at each individual country, it's smaller yet. So banding together, both from a government perspective and a private sector perspective, is really critical to getting the attention of policymakers and really seeing things through to fruition. And you also have to know what your agenda is and what you want to accomplish, because without an objective, you're never going to reach it. And so, I'll just end my remarks on one of my favorite quotes by Robert Kennedy, who said, "Some people look at things the way they are and ask why. I dream things that never were, and I ask why not." So I tell everybody, be the why not. Be part of that change. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric. Well, look, 70% of the American people didn't like either candidate for president. And so the mood is what it is. I'm an optimist. I think America waits a good 4 years. I think it'll work together, the Congress and the President, good things. I think we'll build up our military, have less engagements abroad, try to lower the tensions in the Middle East. I think we're going to get into bilateral trade agreements. We're going to build the Keystone Pipeline. We're going to invest $1 trillion in infrastructure. I hope the economy grows. As it grows, it'll flow into the Caribbean and Central America in many different ways that all of you know. And so I believe that there's an opportunity for prosperity. Now, the specific attention and focus on the Caribbean and Central America is going to be driven by our leaders. And as I said, there's a blank canvas opportunity to impact this president and impact the future cabinet members that will have a say on what takes place in the region. So I think everybody has to do its work. I think we ought to reserve our judgment until to see the new team in full display, and I believe that good things can happen. And frankly, we ought to wake up each day feeling that way anyway. And so I hope you do. I know I will, and I look forward to working with you and CCCA.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Please join me in thanking our panelists. The next
you so much to all of the panelists. I know this discussion is going to be going on for 4 years, so it's a great place to start it. Look forward to continuing it. Pat, thanks for the ad. Appreciate it. Yeah, so obviously CCA will be working in Washington to help define an agenda and a strategy for the next 4 years. And all of these great panelists, I'm looking forward to working with them as we move forward and plan. So I'll take this photo. I'm going to make a quick housekeeping announcement. The rooms have been flipped for the next 2 sessions. Arbitration is now in Segovia, and citizenship by investment is in Colonnade. There will be people just making sure you're in the right place, but obviously those are 2 panels that we're going to be very interested in. Arbitration has been something that's been raised a lot. It's important for Central America and the Caribbean, and we're looking forward to having that discussion. And then citizenship by investment, that's one of the areas in the banking and financial sector that we think is important. It all plays into the correspondent banking issue. And while it's its own issue, there are ramifications and implications across the board. So we're looking forward to that. I invite you to go to the 2 rooms, Segovia for arbitration, citizenship by investment for Colonnade, and again, thank you to our panelists. In the foyer behind you, coffee and soft drinks. So have some coffee, refresh, and see you in 15 minutes.
Here's my card now. I'd love to, yeah.
You know, I spend a third of my time there.
Yeah. How are you? Good. Where are you? You're in Miami? Many moons ago. We started 936. We started in 85. Yes.
You coming to move back?
Well done.
Yeah. You stopped the podcast of the record now? Are you coming to move?